What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with David Locke from Locked On Jazz. The Utah Jazz got off to a hot start this season. They've lost their last 4 games in a row. We'll talk about the importance of Mike Conley to the Utah Jazz team, the production of Lauri Markkanen, what Will Hardy has accomplished with this Utah Jazz squad. But first, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Tonight, I'm taking Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points. How about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds, or maybe Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? And what about Steph Curry, more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is PrizePicks, right? How does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it, they've got you covered for it over at PrizePicks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Jazz, David Locke himself. You can follow on Twitter at DLocke09. Now, look, the Utah Jazz started out the season incredibly hot, or at one point at the top of the Western Conference, have since cooled off a little bit. Now owners of, unfortunately, a 4-game losing streak that directly coincides with the absence of Mike Conley from the lineup. So, David, let's start there. Just how much does this 4-game skid here kind of highlight the importance of Conley to the fabric of this Jazz team?
I mean, I've said the whole time that Mike Conley is the thread holding the fabric together. That's been kind of the line of the way I would think about it. There's a bunch of these pieces, and the pieces are actually much better than everyone thought, but there was some thread that was making them suddenly become a quilt, if you will. And without Mike Conley, it's abundantly clear that they lack it. Now, would have they won these games? Oh, I'm not, that's a hard one to tell, but there have been specific plays in each and every game that you can zero in on that swung the game, where had Mike Conley been in the game, the play would have been done differently. They also did, in fairness to the guys that are playing, I think the 3 best teams we'll see over time, and obviously the Clippers are a shadow of themselves without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, are the Clippers, the Warriors, and the Suns. So this weekend, the Jazz went to Golden State and to Phoenix and played both those teams really tight and in really good games, and played really well in both those games. So I think there's still a whole lot of positives going on here, more than people anticipated, but certainly the piece of Mike Conley missing is the difference between them having chances to win these games and they're falling short.
I mean, Will Hardy's been getting a lot out of this group of guys. How have you seen him kind of adjusting things without Conley over these last 4 games?
Well, the 2 signatures I'd say to Will Hardy so far, one is that fun is underrated in the NBA. He says that an awful lot. Like, this is your life dream to be here, and it's my life dream to coach here, and all of us, so let's have some fun. Fun is underrated in the NBA. I think it's an interesting perspective. I think it's a youthful perspective. And I think he's right. I've seen in my 30 plus years in this league, I've seen just so many players, kind of almost run down by the league and the pressures of it. The second one is a flexibility in how he manages the team. So last night, Nickeil Alexander-Walker got a bunch of time. And then earlier this year, Talen Horton-Tucker got a bunch of time. And he's closed games with Colin Sexton, without Colin Sexton. He's closed games with Malik Beasley, without Malik Beasley. And sometimes it's Jared Vanderbilt, and sometimes it's Kelly Olynyk. And that's become the signature of this team, is that they have a legitimate 9, 10, 11 rotation players who can play. And then he's working them to see who matches on that given night and who closes in that given night. And they've had a lot of success in close games.
And fun leads you to a top 5 offense in the NBA, clearly. So maybe some other teams should try that approach as well. Jordan Clarkson averaging a career best 4.7 assists per game. How has he been able to kind of evolve as a playmaker this season in Will Hardy's system?
Well, that's the perfect word, Jackson. He has evolved since I think the book on Jordan was you might go 2 weeks without 5 assists, and now you're getting 5 assists a game. He's actually the best point guard on the roster right now without Mike Conley, which also says something about how much we miss Mike Conley. But Jordan is a chameleon as a person as well. And I think, and what Will talks a lot about is just incredibly high basketball IQ. And we're seeing that. He's just kind of rolled into a different role. Under Quinn, he was a 6th man of the year, and he was coming off and he was taking, 16 shots in 27 minutes and letting it fly. And now he's up to 32 minutes and he's really finding guys and playing point guard and then reading games beautifully. There was a play late in the game against Phoenix a week ago in which he had scored on the possession before, but he comes around the curl and points to Mike Conley to go to Lauri Markkanen because Markkanen's got a mismatch on campaign. And then the next night, Mike Conley goes out and Jordan Clarkson takes over the game in the final 3 minutes, scoring three straight times against Portland. So he's reading the game, what has to happen. He's showing an array of skills, both unselfish and the ability to still be this great isolation player. And then his ballerina-esque footwork down low makes him slithery and unable to be stopped when he starts pivoting around and always finds a way to scoop that thing up and in.
You mentioned his name there a moment ago, David. Lauri Markkanen has taken a pretty significant leap this season, going from, averaging just under 15 a game last year to almost 22 a game this season. We kind of saw a glimpse of that, this past offseason in his play with, overseas in Eurobasket. How impressed with his production have you been to this point in the season?
I'm wowed by him. I'm wowed by his all sorts of stuff. So first, his pure size, frankly. Just being around him. I mean, this dude is a legit 7 foot, 240 pounds. He is mammoth. Then the array of skills with that 7-footer. I mean, he can, takes a hits a step back 3 last night. 7 feet hitting a step back 3. The amount of guys that can do that gets pretty slim in the world. Then you start just adding in the fact that he, is able to play a power game because he is 240 pounds and drive it up and hook it with his right or his left at times. He's shooting 62% on twos this year. He's a 36% three-point shooter, which is league average, but when you're 7 feet tall, that's a pretty neat thing to have. And then he's just learning what this burden is night in and night out of being the guy. And I think that's been what's most interesting to watch is him trying to figure out how on a nightly basis he can handle this responsibility of being the guy. And I've seen him wear down. He wasn't particularly strong against Detroit. He was 4 of 13. He was 4 of 13 again last night. But there's other nights, where he's just been completely a force. And don't misunderstand this because I understand I'm talking about one of the greatest offensive players in the game ever. He really has a kind of an Anthony Davis and then Kevin Durant skill set. He's just not quite as good as those two. But when you think about 7-footers that can do what Lauri Markkanen can do, that's what you're talking about. And there aren't many of them in this world.
I guess I can see that. I understand why you had to kind of like temper the take there a little bit before saying it, but I guess I can see that comparison as far as, the skill sets go. But David, last thing for you here, what is your best way to kind of describe the Utah Jazz, the iteration of the Utah Jazz this season, right? Because I still kind of don't have a sense of what the goal is, right? Are they playing hopefuls? Is this just kind of a showcasing of all these pieces of, you look at the team, right? And it's like you took the Timberwolves and the Cavs and threw them at the wall, and now it's this year's Utah Jazz. So what's the plan for this team? I
think if you look at Danny Ainge pretty consistently in his history in Boston, we have the nice thing about Ainge is we have a long track record to look at, right? Is he does these rebuilds, which he's now done to the level of 2 NBA Finals team and maybe even a championship team as Boston. This version of Boston looks like the best team in the NBA. He does this, but he doesn't do it in the way you've seen some people where once they've traded one guy, they then just dump the rest, right? Oh, we're going to go into rebuild and we're going to make a move. And now let us move this guy. Now let's make the next 3 moves. The last 2 moves that he made were actually to make the team better. They fleeced the Lakers. Taylor Horton-Tucker for Patrick Beverley is a fleece. Taylor Horton-Tucker is a much better player than Patrick Beverley at this point. And then the Bojan Bogdanovic Kelly Olynyk trade not only saved the Jazz $8 million and set them up for future deals, but was a deal that allowed the Jazz to play basketball. I mean, that's literally what Danny said to me. He's like, hey, if we don't have Kelly Olynyk on this roster, we can't play. So there was, in those two moves, the last two moves he made, what showed me is he was actually trying to still build a basketball team in the midst of this. The trades for Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were such outrageous hauls. I don't think you had a choice but to make them. Even if you didn't plan to rebuild, if someone offered you 5 first-round draft picks, three of them unprotected and one of them being Walker Kessler, I think you have to take it. I think if someone offers you 4 first-round draft picks for Donovan Mitchell, 3 of them unprotected and one of them being Ochai Agbaji from the current draft, I think you have to take it. There has clearly not been that same offer for Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, or whatever it might be that Danny Ainge thinks is good for the franchise. I do believe that if that offer came across right now, that the goal and the mindset of the franchise is still a 36 to 48 month window. And so you're not trying to necessarily win a championship this season. And therefore, if somebody comes calling for any of the pieces, and they have about 11 of them that could help someone win games, I do think if the deal is right, or maybe even if the deal is one-sided toward the Jazz, Danny Ainge will pull the trigger on those.
All right, and I did lie there a moment ago, David, because I did have one more thing for you. What's the latest timetable on Mike Conley? When can we expect him to return?
It's not entirely clear. There was a report that's 2 weeks, but that was kind of dismissed as saying he's kind of on a more of a kind of a day-to-day, but just a progressing timeline. His last game he played was on the 19th, so we're at about 10 days by the time the Jazz play again. I don't think you'll see him too soon, but hopefully soon. I mean, I think it's a big piece for the Jazz. It's not surprising to me that, they did beat Memphis this year earlier by 1 without Mike Conley. So in 5 games without Mike this year, they're 1-4. That's not a stunner to me. Ja Morant did not play in that game for Memphis either, but it is a necessity if the Jazz are going to try to win games to have Mike Conley on the floor.
How will the Utah Jazz continue to navigate their season without Mike Conley leading them throughout? Will they be wheeling and dealing, guys, ahead of this year's NBA trade deadline? Of course, you will have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Jazz. David, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
My pleasure. Great job on the show. I catch it every Monday.